dark and red. Mitchell's heart pounded, then settled down. His initial alarm made him feel stupid. Performance art, right? Fake blood, right? There was some locally famous artist who was always doing that crazy shit. Mitchell didn't know much about the guy, because he seemed to like to create mystery about himself, but girls Mitchell's age were apparently really into him. He redirected the beam across the width of the theater, shining it on the other two moviegoers. Unmoving, chins down. Heavy sigh. "I don't want to call the cops," he told the man a couple of feet from him. "But I will. Come on, buddy." He shook the man's shoulder, easily at first, then harder. The jostling made the guy's head flip back like a Pez dispenser. An ocean roared between Mitchell's ears, and his legs went weak. The man's throat had been sliced. He swore he could see arteries, and what looked like a spine. And now he realized he could actually smell blood. The flashlight dropped from his hand and rolled slowly under the seats, the handle hitting chair legs every so often on the way down. Mitchell shouted over his shoulder, hoping the projectionist or the other usher would hear. "Turn on the overheads!" Someone flipped the switch and the room went dull bright, revealing the shabby seats and the concession cups littering the floor. The other usher must have heard Mitchell shout, because he appeared at the back of the theater with a bored look on his face, candy bar in his hand. The flashlight finally stopped rolling. "Call the cops!" Mitchell's voice was tight and weird, and an acidic taste filled his mouth. He'd call the cops himself, but he was afraid he was going to throw up. Not getting that this was serious, the co-worker said, "Just make him leave." Mitchell's eyes latched onto a popcorn bucket on the floor as he looked for comfort in the mundane. "They can't." The hysteria in his voice must have finally given the other usher a clue, because he pulled out his phone, suddenly sounding nervous. "What should I tell them?" "Tell them 3 guys are dead." Mitchell thought about all the people who'd trailed past him in the dark on their way out of the theater. One of them had done this. One of them had committed murder while the lights were off. Mitchell himself had maybe even torn the person's ticket. And then he wondered if he was in danger. The cops would ask if he'd noticed anybody suspicious, and he'd say no, but the killer might think he could identify him. While the co-worker made the call, Mitchell grabbed the empty popcorn container from the floor and threw up in it. Then he took a photo of the nearest body. Chapter 3. It was after midnight as Jude leaned low over the motorcycle, roaring down I-94 in the direction of the homicide. It wasn't like her to ride without a helmet, but she couldn't wear a full face mask tonight, not with the claustrophobia of her dream lingering in the corners of her brain. Strange to welcome murder, but she'd been relieved to hear Uriah's voice on the phone, telling her she was needed. Just minutes before her partner's call, the person in the apartment below had banged against his ceiling, and Jude had come awake sweating, heart pounding. Over the past weeks, that same neighbor had made a few feeble attempts to strike up a conversation in the hallway, but Jude had effectively shut him down. What could she say? "Sorry my screams wake you?" 2 months had passed since the shootout on the interstate. 2 months since Jude killed her estranged father to save her partner and a kidnapping victim named Octavia. And even though there was solid proof of their guilt in several murders, including the murder of Jude's own mother, many in the area refused to believe that the governor, Jude's father, had been behind such atrocities. After all, the man had posed for photos with their babies and comforted them in times of personal tragedy. The governor's death had polarized the state, turning Jude into a hero or a villain, depending on one's perspective. She'd seen the negative press about her, and she would have liked to say it didn't bother her, but that would be a lie. It was hard enough to take a life, but to take the life of a person you'd grown up with, at one time even loved? No matter that she'd saved someone in the process. The department psychologist had suggested she take a year off, but a year off would mean a year of looking at herself more closely than she wanted to. Instead, she'd stayed in Homicide, dutifully gone to therapy, and privately obsessed over certain things in ways that might be considered unhealthy. Along with that, she carried an emptiness inside that had nothing to do with the loss.